Welcome to The Thing About Austen, a podcast about Jane Austen's world. I'm Zan.
And I'm Diane. And this episode, we're talking about Lovers Vows. So a little bit of business before we get into this episode. We have a pronunciation correction. So there was a name in the Assizes episode that came up multiple times. It's not like one of those episodes where, we mention a scholar like one time. No, it came up multiple times. So we said Cockburn, but we learned just days after that episode came out that it's actually pronounced Coburn.
Yep.
And probably that's, we're not even quite getting that completely accurate, but it's definitely not Cockburn. So what's funny, though, is that this knowledge did not come to us via a listener email, as you might assume, but instead came via my husband. So he hadn't even listened to the episode yet. When I say that this episode came out and then we learned about this 2 days later. So we're having a conversation just about words that are pronounced completely differently from how they're spelled and all that. Because, yes, I do live a nerd life in my household as well as on this podcast.
Authentic Diane is what you get here.
And he goes, oh, yeah, I have a great one that I just learned. So he's all, how would you pronounce? And he spells it out. And I go, Cockburn? Although I'm already getting like that sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. I'm like, this is not good. To which he says, yeah, you might think that, but it's actually Coburn. Like, can you believe it? No, I cannot believe it.
He's like waiting for you to laugh at this punchline. And you're like, what?
Imagine my face in this moment. Are you kidding me? We just mispronounced that so many times. In
20
most
times.
Immediately calls in, like, you will never believe. Anyway, we had just put out this episode. We had no clue. And here comes my husband with this newly acquired information. And I'm just like, you couldn't have learned this and passed this little nugget on to me, I don't know, 3 days earlier? And then that same week, an episode of one of my favorite podcasts, The Illusionist, comes out where this same pronunciation comes up again. And Zan also listens to The Illusionist. So almost immediately, the two of us are texting each other in real time. She's like, have you listened to it? I'm like, yes, I have.
It's haunting us now, is what you need to know.
Anyway, so to any of our UK listeners who were probably just pained listening to that episode, our apologies. We do our best, and we do typically look things up. But that was one that it honestly didn't even occur to us to check because it seemed pretty straightforward.
It's so phonetic.
Oh, dear. Again, we do our best. Caveat, there are quite a few German name pronunciations in this episode. We did do a check with some native German speakers. Shout out to Tabby and Charlie. Thank you very much. Good friends of mine for helping us out with that. But again, we're doing our best. So
if we get it wrong, it's on me and Diane.
Yeah.
It's on us.
Bear with us. Anyway, so now on to the main event. So this episode has us at Mansfield Park. The Honorable John Yates, a new friend of Tom Bertram's, has come to Mansfield for a visit. And he has arrived having recently caught the theatrical bug.
So, this is from the text. Happily for him, a love of the theater is so general, an itch for acting so strong among young people, that he could hardly out-talk the interest of his hearers. From the first casting of the parts to the epilogue, it was all bewitching, and there were few who did not wish to have been a party concerned, or would have hesitated to try their skills. The play had been Lovers Vows, and Mr. Yates was to have been Count Castle.
Before we even begin, we should provide a caveat that this is a wildly popular topic with scholars, as well as with our listeners. This is one of our most requested episodes, which means there is so much more to discuss about the nuance of this play, its cultural context, connections to Austen, its role in Mansfield Park, just the history of its publication, all of that, than we can hope to cover in this episode. There's loads of great scholarship out there, and we're going to try to hit the highlights, but we will inevitably miss some details. If this is a topic that you are very interested in, definitely check out some of the scholarship we mentioned in this episode if you want to do some more deep reading on Lovers' Vows in relation to Mansfield Park. In particular, Paula Byrne and Susan Allen Ford have both done a lot on this topic.
Right. Yeah. So here's some background on Lovers' Vows. This is the title of a play written in 1798 by Elizabeth Inchbald, an English novelist, actress, dramatist, and translator. It is a loose translation of the German language play Das Kinderliebe in 1780 by August von Kotzebue.
Kotzebue's plays were extremely popular in the late 18th and early 19th century. There were many English language translations of his plays that were performed in all the major theaters in England. We also know that Austen herself watched adaptations of his plays.
In her book, The Genius of Jane Austen, Her Love of Theater and Why She Works in Hollywood, Paula Byrne writes, quote, Austen saw various Kotzebue adaptations at the professional theater, including The Birthday, Of Age Tomorrow, and The Beehive. She attended a performance of the last of these as late as 1813.
Inchbald's Lovers Vows was one of at least 4 English-language adaptations of Das Kinderliebe published between 1798 and 1800. In addition to Inchbald's adaptation, there was one by Anne Plumtree titled The Natural Son, published in 1798, only days after Inchbald's play premiered. Next was another 1798 adaptation by Stephen Porter titled Lovers Vows, or The Child of Love. And the last one was an adaptation by Benjamin Thompson, published in 1800, entitled Lovers Vows, or The Natural Son. So, a lot of originality in terms of titles coming from these dudes.
Yeah, they're like, oh, these are both good. We'll just mash them together. And yet, Inchbald's adaptation seems to have been the most successful. Her play was first performed at Covent Garden in 1798, and it continued to run in the 1789 to 99 season, totaling 42 performances. It went on to be staged at Drury Lane, the Haymarket, and Theatre Royal in Bath. And the text of Inchbald's play was equally popular, with 16 editions appearing between 1798 and 1800.
Lovers Vows was performed several times in Bath between 1801 and 1806, when Austen was in residence. There are debates about how many times it was performed, but more recent scholarship by Azhar Hussain suggests it was performed 10 times in Bath during Austen's stay. This doesn't guarantee that Austen saw a performance of Lovers Vows, of course, but it does point to proximity and the likelihood that Austen would have been aware of the performances.
And there are several reasons that Inchbald's Lovers Vows was a popular adaptation of Kotzebue's play. First, several of the other adaptations were slightly more literal or faithful adaptations of the original, which was mildly scandalous. For example, a literal translation of Das Kinderliebe would be The Love Child. As that title suggests, the plot of the play deals with sex outside of marriage and illegitimate birth.
Inchbald took a different approach than the other adapters. In her own words in the preface to the published play, she explained, quote, "A literal translation of The Child of Love was given to me by the manager of the Covent Garden Theatre, to be adapted, as my opinion should direct, for his stage."
So from there, she describes how she reworked the play to suit the English stage and sensibilities, writing, "In no one instance would I suffer my respect for Kotzebue to interfere with my profound respect for the judgment of a British audience."
She goes on to explain how she softened some of the speeches specifically for Amelia, the character Mary Crawford takes on, making her less forward in her professions of love. Quote, "I have endeavored to attach the attention and sympathy of the audience by whimsical insinuations rather than coarse abruptness."
Despite these changes, the play still presents Amelia as a fairly forthright and flirtatious woman, which, again, makes perfect sense for Mary Crawford to be cast as her character. All that is to say, Inchbald's play is a loose adaptation of the original, which is likely why it was so successful. It wasn't without its naysayers, mostly from the other adapters.
Yeah, little suspect there, right? Sour grapes.
Right. But some of them felt that her version of Amelia was a hoyden or very pert. But, Inchbald paid more attention to her audience than it seems like the other adaptations did.
Yeah, I mean, Plumtree in particular had a lot of words to say about her characterization
Again,
of Amelia.
Her play that came out 2 days later.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. She had a lot of feelings about... It's hard to say, right? Like, how much of this is just like unbiased sort of critique, and how much of this is maybe like, I'm a little upset that your version seems to be a lot more popular than mine.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So here is a brief summary of the play. Spoilers. It opens with Agatha Freeburg in a state of poverty when she is discovered by her son, Frederick, who has been away as a soldier for several years. Agatha tells Frederick that he is the son of Baron Wildenheim, who seduced and then abandoned Agatha 20 years earlier. Frederick is incensed but leaves to try to beg in order to support his mother. Frederick unknowingly comes across the Baron and tries to rob him. He is arrested by the Baron. Agatha then goes to Frederick and tells him who he attacked and encourages her son to try to talk to the Baron.
In the meantime, there is a secondary plot happening in the play. The Baron is trying to convince his daughter, Amelia, to marry the foppish Count Kessel. He enlists the help of the clergyman, Anhalt, who is also Amelia's tutor, to talk to Amelia about marriage in an attempt to persuade her to marry Kessel. During that discussion, Amelia turns the table and professes her love for Anhalt.
There's a flurry of conversations between the characters, but ultimately, Anhalt and Frederick meet with the Baron, explain that Frederick is the Baron's son, and convince him to marry Agatha. The Baron also then consents to the marriage between Anhalt and Amelia, rather than forcing his daughter to marry the Count. And everyone sighs with relief. There's a lot going on there.
There's a lot, yeah. So the plot largely resolves all those problematic parts of the play. But as Deirdre LaFay writes, quote, although the play ends with morality restored, some critics of the time considered it still too risque, which is obviously part of Fanny and Edmund's concerns about the home theatrical as it shows up in Mansfield Park.
Before we get into the novel, however, let's move the conversation a bit more towards Austen and her own engagement with home theatricals. Let's start with the basics. A home theatrical is a play or dramatic performance staged informally in a domestic space, usually by family and friends for a small, invited audience. So, you're not renting out a London theater and charging tickets to the general public.
Yeah, what Austen is depicting in Mansfield Park is actually pretty accurate. So according to Lucy Worsley in Jane Austen at Home, quote, Georgian debates about whether amateur acting was virtuous or its opposite were very lively, and Jane uses this to create drama in her novel.
During the 18th and early 19th centuries, private theatricals were wildly popular among the upper classes, but critics worried that acting was a morally gray area. According to Gillian Russell in The Cambridge Companion to British Theatre, 1730 to 1830, Austen's use of Lovers' Vows as a home theatrical, quote, demonstrates her awareness of how the fashion for private theatricals could illuminate some central concerns of Georgian society and culture, such as the relationship between public and private spheres, the changing meanings of family and issues of gender, sexuality, class, and national identity.
So, for instance, private theatricals were a form of social performance, and it tended to blur the boundaries between public and private, this idea of art versus life, and how this might provoke anxieties about propriety, especially for young women. Women performing on stage, even in a private context, risked being seen as immodest or attention-seeking, especially if the roles involved flirtation or emotional display. So the idea that playing a part could lead to insincerity in life was a genuine concern.
Jane Austen knew all of this, and she used it to full effect in Mansfield Park. In her article, It Is About Lovers' Vows, Susan Allen Ford writes that, in Mansfield Park, Austen involves both her readers and her characters in the contentious history of the play itself, as well as the fears and pleasures of play acting. In so doing, she implicates us in the processes of reading and viewing.
So very much so inserting us into this moment. And so again, Austen is using that on purpose. She's drawing from real life. Her own family was actually deeply invested in home theatricals. Paula Byrne in The Real Jane Austen writes that, quote, Austen was only 7 when the first play was performed in the dining room of the rectory at Steventon.
Eventually, the Austens got so into these theatricals that they converted the barn into a makeshift theater. Her cousin Philly Walter even wrote, My uncle's barn is fitting up quite like a theater, and all the young folks are to take their part.
These productions weren't just family affairs either. They included cousins, neighbors, and even George Austen's pupils, who were trained in elocution by reading aloud. Byrne writes, The Steventon theatricals took place between 1782 and 1790, coinciding with the period in which Jane Austen's earliest literary works were written.
The plays they chose were ambitious, too. They performed works by Susanna Centlivre and David Garrick, big names in late 18th century drama. And Austen didn't leave the stage behind as she got older. Well into her 30s, she was still performing, once taking on the role of Mrs. Candor in Richard Brinsley Sheridan's School for Scandal, quote, with great spirit, according to one guest's recollection.
So when the characters in Mansfield Park scramble to convert a room for their production of Lovers' Vows, it's not a plot device, it is a nod to Austen's own upbringing in this context of home theatricals.
There have been past debates about whether Austen frames the home theatrical in the novel as a moral quandary in its own right. That is Austen herself condemning home theatricals? But this seems unlikely considering the Austen family's own history with home theatricals and her own time on the home theatrical stage.
Mm-hmm.
So most recent scholarship tends to acknowledge, like Deirdre LaFay, that, quote, the point Jane is making in the novel is not that amateur dramatics are themselves wrong in principle, but rather that these young people are defying what Sir Thomas would approve of and are creating a really intense situation for all the relationship undercurrents at Mansfield. It's like, wow, the choice of this particular play is like...
It's delicious, really. I mean, this play becomes a pressure cooker for all of these moments. The rehearsals stir up jealousies and romantic tensions. Maria and Henry Crawford, Edmund and Mary Crawford, I mean, all their parts are, they're just playing them a little bit too well, honestly. And as LaFay puts it, quote, the sexual tensions created at this time make the production of Lovers' Vows the turning point for the eventual collapse of the Bertram family group. I mean, there's a lot at stake going on here.
So let's really get into the way this play shows up in the plot of Mansfield Park. Remember that Yeats is the one who brings the idea of a home theatrical, and specifically Lovers' Vows, to Mansfield.
And we do need to acknowledge that it seems Austen was very familiar with the play. According to Azhar Hussein's article, Jane Austen, Lovers' Vows, and the Periodic Press, quote, Austen's use of Lovers' Vows indicates that she must have had access to a text of the play that she used as she composed the novel. Count Castle's 42 speeches have been carefully counted, and one quotation taken from the play, quote, when two sympathetic hearts meet in the marriage state, matrimony may be called a happy life. This is quoted word perfect from Inchbald's version. At the moment of Sir Thomas's entrance, Henry Crawford has Maria Bertram's hand pressed to his heart, as appears in the stage directions of the play. I mean, she is paying attention to the details.
Yeah. This is not like a passing literary allusion. Like, she's really incorporating the play heavily into the text here.
Absolutely.
But back to the setup for the Bertrams' theatrical. There are lots of debates, particularly between Tom and Edmund, about the propriety of putting on a home theatrical in the first place. But the real debate at Mansfield seems to pick up once they choose the play. So here is a reminder of how that scene unfolds. Tom is getting fed up trying to find a play that suits everyone's preferences, and then says, Lovers' Vows, and why should not Lovers' Vows do for us as well as for the Ravenshaws? How came it never to be thought of before? It strikes me as if it would do exactly. What say you all?
Then we get a prolonged conversation about casting. Tom immediately takes the comedic role of the butler, while allowing Yeats and Crawford to choose between the Baron and Frederick. Yeats snags the role of the Baron, since he was very envious of that role when it was performed at the Ravenshaws. He was like, I could do that better. So now he's like, this is my chance. And then Crawford is going to be Frederick. That leaves Castle and Anhalt uncast for the men at this moment.
The next big casting decision has to be about the women. Initially, it seems that Agatha and Amelia can be played by the Bertram sisters. But Tom immediately says Amelia has to be played by Mary Crawford. But Julia and Maria obviously want to play opposite Crawford, so they want dibs on Agatha. This next part is so painful. It's so painful.
This is very cringy, yeah. So Crawford weighs in and he says, I must entreat Miss Julia Bertram, he said, not to engage in the part of Agatha, or it will be the ruin of all my solemnity. You must not, indeed, you must not. He goes on to say that they have had too many lively conversations. She's too jovial, she's too vibrant to play this tragic role of Agatha.
Austen writes, pleasantly, courteously, it was spoken, but the manner was lost in the matter to Julia's feelings. She saw a glance at Maria which confirmed the injury to herself. It was a scheme, a trick. She was slighted. Maria was preferred. The smile of triumph, which Maria was trying to suppress, showed how well it was understood.
Oof.
It's...
Yeah.
Ooh. I mean, credit to Julia that she does not fall for Crawford's kind of flattery and like, you're just too funny. We've had I wouldn't be able to keep my countenance. She's like, I know exactly what's going on here.
Yeah. She's like, oh, you chose my engaged sister? Okay, I'm out. So she refuses to take a part in the play at all, even after Crawford tries to offer her the part of Amelia.
Well, and part of it is like Tom, who seems to be completely clueless to all of this. It's like,
totally.
She can't be Amelia. She's too tall. Like, no, it has to be Mary Crawford.
Yeah, he's missing a lot of the subtext for certain. Yeah, and so, yeah, she's like, I'm out. I'm not doing this. And so then, as just kind of a quick reminder of the rest of the casting, Rushworth is given the role of Count Castle. And then after initially refusing to be a part of the play, Edmund chooses to play Anhalt opposite Miss Crawford.
To preserve the dignity of the home theatrical, Zan.
Yeah.
I guess to his credit, I do think like in his conscious mind, he really does think that, he's trying to, he can tell that Mary doesn't really want to have to act opposite this near stranger.
Strange person. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but it's just like, okay, dude, come on.
You caved pretty quickly.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And poor Fanny just has to listen to him be like, he's like, Fanny, I'd love to hear your opinion. And then he's like, well, actually, I've kind of already decided. I'm gonna go do this.
Yep.
So let's get into the reasons why all of this setup is so important. As Paula Byrne points out in The Real Jane Austen, the production of Lovers Vows creates an erotically charged atmosphere that allows the characters to express desires they normally keep hidden. Fanny Price, as ever the quiet observer, watches with growing unease.
It's like watching a train wreck, She just has to just staring. She's like, wow, this will end poorly. So, for example, in The Genius of Jane Austen, Byrne points out that Lovers Vows works as a metatext for exploring important relationships between the characters. Edmund Bertram, the pious, shy clergyman who is in love with a gorgeous, witty femme fatale, Mary Crawford, undertakes to play the part of a pious, shy clergyman who is seduced by a gorgeous, witty femme fatale, played by Mary Crawford. So many plot parallels, intrigues, allusions, moments of drama are contained in the amateur theatricals episode, which dominates the first quarter of the novel. Just, so many good parallels.
One of the best examples of this is after Miss Crawford has been made aware of her casting in the play and delivers the brilliant line, "Who is to be Anhalt? What gentleman among you am I to have the pleasure of making love to?" And just silence in the room, everyone turns to stare, and then everyone's like talking all at once, like just even the way that Austen writes the scene
is so good.
It's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, okay, if you were missing the parallels between the characters. Yes. So we see this kind of overt exploration of flirtation and the relationship between Maria and Crawford. So according to Elizabeth Newark in her article, Words Not Spoken, Courtship and Seduction in Jane Austen's Novels, quote, "It seems odd to modern eyes that they choose to act mother and son, but then there are, it seems, more opportunities for embraces that way." And that's pretty much the point.
Byrne highlights how Austen uses a setup to expose the dangerous intimacies unfolding behind the scenes. Fanny Price watches with growing alarm as Maria and Henry rehearse scenes that demand physical closeness. The stage directions are explicit. Agatha presses him to her breast. Frederick takes her hand and places it to his heart. It's very melodramatic.
Very. And again, the physical contact here, you can't understate that. So you can imagine that Maria and Henry are rehearsing a lot.
We've just really got to get these lines down.
Can we run through these maybe 5 more times? So yeah, even Mary Crawford jokes about it, saying, "If they are not perfect, I shall be surprised." She's like, so they've done a lot of rehearsing.
They've been working real hard. And Austen doesn't let us forget the consequences. Maria's role as Agatha, a fallen woman, foreshadows a fallen woman. We're putting that in air quotes there.
Major air quotes. Mm-hmm.
Foreshadows her own fate. Like her character, she becomes a social outcast as a result of a love affair. As Ford points out in her book, What Jane Austen's Characters Read and Why, quote, "The play's other female lead, Agatha, highlights the dangerous relationship between the courtship and seduction plots as well as their effects on women." Effects on women, because obviously, as we know, Henry Crawford faces no consequences for his
consequences whatsoever. Yeah. So, of course, the home theatrical doesn't end well. We're all shocked. Byrne calls it, quote, "one of the funniest moments in Austen's canon when Sir Thomas Bertram returns from Antigua and finds himself standing on a stage next to Yates, a man he has never met and who is ranting in his own study. Byrne describes it as a moment of comic humiliation, but also a turning point. Sir Thomas is appalled by the conduct of his children, and his response is swift and not even a little bit measured.
Yeah. He's quite thorough.
Yes. Quote, his revenge is to burn all the unbound copies of the play.
And through it all, Fanny, as always, remains our central lens for all of these shenanigans and all of the interpersonal drama that is going on.
Yeah, she's the only one that seems to have like the big bird's eye view of all of the things that are happening and why they are problematic. But even as she's drawn into the drama, at one point she is helping Mary Crawford practice, she's prompting Rushworth on his lines, she's helping to sew costumes. Throughout all of this, she never loses sight of the moral stakes. She sees what the others won't admit, that the play is giving license to real romantic entanglements, and the emotional fallout is already underway.
And thus ends Lovers Vows, so they never actually get to put on their play.
No.
Despite all of the industrious Aunt Norris's efforts to aid them in their home theatrical.
Yes.
She's committed.
Well, I mean, and her green baize curtain is actually like the only thing that survives, actually, all of this stuff.
Well, yeah, she's got to take that back to her house with her, you know?
She's got to be economical about this.
Yeah, she knows what's up. I mean, I love that when Sir Thomas does show up, despite all of her, what she said earlier about like, oh, he wouldn't have a problem with it. She's real quick to hide that costume. She's like, oh, nothing to see here. So this is, you know, definitely something that film adaptations are going to address because it's a huge part of the book. But it really is a big moment in the 1999 adaptation.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
they really play up all of the romantic drama and the interpersonal shenanigans. And in particular, Edmith Davis, who plays Mary Crawford, she's really eating it up.
She is doing the most with her lines. Right. So the scene where Mary asks, "What gentleman among you am I to have the pleasure of making love to?" She does that with the most sass possible. And then the way they film it is so perfect because like they're shooting the angle from the back. And so you see her back and then you see all four of the men involved just turn and look at her. She's just like, yeah, I said that. It's kind of just.
And then the way she kind of like, the way she sort of like holds her body in that moment, she is already on stage, right? And they are the audience.
Yes. I mean, it's absolutely like, there's even like the proscenium arch is happening because they are in the, like it's so perfectly staged. And she is like, yes, I am on. And yeah, she's delivering. It's so good. It is so good. I think they really did justice to both the lines that Austen gave her, but also how provocative this actually was.
Well, they also do justice to Henry and Maria really getting into their rehearsals. So, I mean...
Yeah. The part where their physicality, like where Fanny walks past them and he's like quite literally like holding Maria to his face. And it's like, okay. Yeah. They were making sure they got those lines correct. That's all they were doing.
Well, if you have any thoughts on Lovers Vows, we would love to hear them. You can find us on our website, thethingaboutaustin.com, and email us at thethingaboutaustin@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram at thethingaboutaustin, although quite honestly, we're not kind of doing as much on Instagram these days. We're trying to find a more like central focus for all the various like social platforms and stuff, just because it's a lot to manage. So definitely the website is probably the best place. Like if you have comments or thoughts that you want to share with us, or email, as always. And you can check out our merch for the podcast on Redbubble. Go to aboutaustin.redbubble.com. And you can always support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It's very exciting. I think we're like getting close maybe to 500 reviews.
Yes, we are.
If you want to help us reach that threshold, that would be great. So we wanted to share a few reviews today. Oddity Rain says that it's always the highlight of my morning when I see a new episode. Churchill Wood says, so enlightening. This is a great podcast for really understanding the cultural nuances of Austen's time. Just as few will understand our references to Vegas or Elvis or Silicon Valley in 200 years, these ladies shine a spotlight on similar references in Jane's novels. Now, like, yeah, who was Regency Elvis? Like, that's a conversation.
Right, that is a real conversation I need to have, yes.
And Pink Panda 773 says, finally, I love it. I finally found my people. To which we say, welcome. You have indeed found your people.
That's us.
That's us. And thank you to everyone who has left a review and to everyone who listens to the podcast. We truly, truly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Stay tuned for next episode when we'll be talking about Grosvenor Street.
Thanks for listening.